Hello, welcome. We are going to talk today about some assessments for figuring out whether what you're doing can actually work in business. So I know sometimes I talk to entrepreneurs and part of what's they're questioning all the time is, can this even work? And I've certainly been there myself where it isn't something we necessarily share with everybody, but there's always that question in the back of our mind, can this turn out? Am I trying something that's insane? Can this even work? Is really the question that I think a lot of people have. And so if you've got that question, you're in the right place. Sadly, I can't really, in this context, tell you yes or no, but what I want to do is I want to give you these criteria for you to think about to help understand and figure out for yourself whether or not what you're doing has legs and can live. So my objective is help you get some clarity on your odds for success and really some insights and some tools. I've included a bunch of downloads. There's actually things to help score yourself on some of these topics. And I encourage you to read those. And we're going to talk probably 80% more about insights and thoughts than practical terms. So the way that we're going to cover this is cover the things that really matter, and those matter. And so we're sort of covering this initially because those are the agenda. So what matters? We're going to talk about yourself, as the vehicle, as the CEO. Your product. Does your product have legs? The structure of your business. Will that work? Does your plan? Can that work in the world? Do you have the relationships that are required to succeed, or the capacity to create relationships, and the runway, the time to pull it off? With Fastest Route, part of the insight that I am executing with Fastest Route is that we all have sort of this common sense that comes from the television or venture capital or people that are MBAs, where people are trying to learn how to build multi-billion-dollar companies or take the majority share of a market. And that's just not really the game that 99% of businesses are engaged in. And so people have this television common sense, this intuition of the things to work on in your business that matter the most to them. And what I found is that a lot of times people aren't working on the things that are going to get them to thrive most quickly. And that's really what Fastest Route is all about, is helping people get to that point where their business is thriving as quickly as possible. And these are the things that I found matter: are yourself, the product, structure, plan, relationships. So what matters? So we all sort of have, hopefully, this introspection that goes like, can I pull this off? Can I be a great CEO? And there are all sorts of tests of, are you an entrepreneur? And that is a question everybody has. It's a valid question. And I tend to not think of it as like sort of this binary, are you an entrepreneur? I tend to think of it as to recognize what are the strengths that are most required for you for it to be a seamless, easy thing. Because I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs. I've worked on business plan competitions where I was responsible for the coaches. And as being responsible for the coaches, I saw all the business plans. So I was on this for 8 years. Twice a year, we'd get 150 to 300 businesses come in. And so I got exposure to a lot of people that were doing a lot of things over time, and they'd come back. And so I got to see what works and what doesn't work. And so, it is not a matter of whether you can or can't. It's like there are certain characteristics that make it easier for you. Because what I found is sometimes it was easy for people, easier than it is for me. And some people, it was like so hard because they're just so not wired for it that you wonder whether it's worth the effort. And then, do you have something valuable to sell? Is your product make sense in the marketplace? Is your business structured for success? Do you have the habits? Are you in a position to take it forward? And a lot of times this is something that is of all the things, this may be the easiest to correct. Is your plan viable? So a plan, we see some opening in the marketplace and we're taking action to execute. Sometimes those plans are beautiful. Sometimes the business plan, your strategy It's beautiful and it'll take you there. Sometimes it's pretty obvious that it's not going to work. Um, we Business is a lot more about personal relationships than a lot of people want it to be. And so do you have the skills and the relationships, skills to produce relationships and the relationships in place to run? And how long do you have to work? So we're going to talk about each one of these individually. So the self. So are you the kind of self that can execute? When I was responsible for coaches for the Great Lakes Entrepreneurs Quest, the business plan competition, we were in the habit of reviewing business plans. And so we were trying to figure out whether this business would succeed. And what I learned from a lot of the investors is that people invest, what they say is that they pick the horse, or that they pick the jockey, not the horse. And so the people who really invest in businesses, what they're looking at is the person leading the company. And it occurred to me that we were putting so much time and energy like assessing the horse, but not really spending much time assessing the jockey. We were looking at the business plan, and the business plan didn't really have much about the person that wrote it. Now, obviously, you could see the skill of the person by the document that they created, but it wasn't a very direct thing. So I created this program to recognize the entrepreneur, and we put that in place and we started identifying that. And so you're going to get some of the tools that I developed in that process. And so you've got a certain ground, right? So if you think about what are the things that matter? And then you have to compare that in terms of how are you automatically. So ground is how you behave automatically without self-reflection or without the application of skills of mitigating. And so so the ground is how you would act normally. And typically the way that you're going to see this is when you are executing under stress, when the time is a pressure, when people are bearing down at you, when there's something very stressful about the situation, your ground shows up. A lot of times elsewhere, we're sort of holding ourselves together with mitigating practices. So those mitigating practices are the things that we do to recognize that our ground is insufficient. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I've noticed is there's sort of, how do you deal with conflict? And I'll share a little bit about myself, which is I see that there's, you can fight or blend. Now, I have over my life, I've met a lot of people that are just so good at blending, you know, this art of like just sort of going yes and rather than but. My ground is, you know, I'm not proud of it, but my ground is much more of a fight. And so if you tell me something, you know, if you confront me with something, I'm going to go, my ground is to fight. And what I've come to find is, while I think it is important to have that move, it's not a good first standard move. I'm much more, I think it's much more effective to blend. And so I have developed mitigating practices, I have habits that make it so that, you know, one of the things I do is I say yes and. I've just trained myself to say that. So if you tell me, if I teach something to you and you say, oh no, self isn't important, Kevin, it's really the business plan. I might now, rather than saying you're crazy, you're wrong, I might go, interesting point, and I see what you're saying, and these things are important too. You know, so it's a blending skill. So I've got these mitigating practices. But if I'm tired, if I'm stressed out, if I'm pushed, if there's a time criticality, and if I'm doing something, if I'm in front of a bunch of people and I'm feeling threatened and they say, no, it isn't, then I might lean into it. And so my ground comes out, but I've got mitigating practices. So hopefully that helps you understand that. And there are certain things that matter for your ground as an entrepreneur, certain things that don't. And so we're going to talk about that. So that's the essential skills. Some things matter and are much more important as an entrepreneur, and others aren't. And then mood management is just this general reality that the mood that we're in allows us to be, it dictates the sort of portfolio of opportunities of emotions to have, which determines which actions are available to us. So if I'm in a mood of panic, my peripheral vision shrinks, my ability to think in long horizons of time is diminished, my ability to feel emotions of love, care, and concern for others almost evaporates. I become very self-centered when you are in a mood of panic. So if you're in a mood of panic, it's really tough to do long-term strategic planning. So I want to talk about what I call the essential skills of entrepreneurship. These are the most fundamental required set of skills to succeed as an entrepreneur. Now, when I say that, these are the things that are most important. If you nail each one of these essential skills, then it's going to seem seamless and easy for you to be successful as an entrepreneur. If you don't have them, it is going to cause some struggle. It's going to make it harder. It's going to reduce the level to which you can be successful. It may not mean the difference between you succeeding or not, but what it means is you're going to have accommodating, mitigating skills to cover the gap, or mitigating practices to cover the gaps in your skill. The first thing I want to talk about is coachability. So coachability is one of the most difficult things to change in oneself. And it's really peculiar because what coachability means is, are you adept at taking advice from others? And this is a really peculiar phenomenon because entrepreneurs at the heart of them really are seeing something different in the marketplace. They see so there's a certain measure of independence, an almost crusty sort of unwillingness to listen to others, or unwillingness to just take what other people say at face value. They're constantly sort of evaluating on their own and coming to different conclusions. You know, ultimately, that's what an entrepreneur does kind of fundamentally, is it says, what you guys are all doing is wrong. I'm going to do it differently, and I know I'm going to succeed. And, you know, whether they're right or wrong, time will tell, but that inclination is to say, the way that you guys are doing it is wrong, I'm going to do it a different way. If what you do is like, if you look at what everybody else is doing and saying, that's great, I want to do what you're going to do, and you just do it and you just do it well, then you're a great business owner. You're great operating a business. That's not an entrepreneurial skill set. The entrepreneurial skill set says, all those people are doing it this way. That's not effective. The more effective way is this way. And so there is a contrariness to entrepreneurship that makes them, and that is essential to being an entrepreneur. But if you can't take advice from other people, there's no way that you can succeed in the long term, because there's just too much to know. If you just go on your own intuition and execute, and you don't take advice from others that have been there before you, then I've just never seen that work. There's some glaring obstacle. These people typically have something preventing them from succeeding that is obvious to many people around them, yet they can't pierce the consciousness of that person. So being coachable, being willing to hear what other people say, and being able to effectively accept and discard their advice depending upon, you know, some criteria to figure out whether it works. In other words, don't take everything that everybody says, but you have to listen to it all, and you have to have the capacity to let some people pierce your certainty. If you're that kind of person that everybody says you're pig-headed, you're stubborn, you never listen to anyone, if you get that kind of feedback a lot, there's something there to pay attention to and to work on, and it is an obstacle for you to succeed. And so when I meet business owners that can't pierce that, I don't put much stock in their success long term. They will have an incredibly tumultuous career where they start stuff, goes great, and then it breaks, it crashes, and it starts another one and breaks. I see them over and over again, and there's just breakdowns surrounding them. Integrity is doing what you say you're going to do. So if you're going to have a business, if you're going to introduce new practices to people, you're going to tell, as an entrepreneur, you're teaching them you're going to do something different, and here's this new practice, and I'm going to help you do that. If you tell people about this and then don't live up to the promises that you've made, then you can't succeed in business. So if some people, if you're never on time for meetings, if you tell people all the time that you're going to do something and then you don't end up doing it, the people that are successful in business are really somewhat pathological with what looks like pathological, sort of in social situations. Their insistence upon doing what they say they're going to do and have others do what they say they're going to do is pretty profound. And so if you're really lackadaisical about that stuff, it's going to be a source of problem for you. Now, maybe you can get someone else to like manage this for you, and that's one way to have a mitigating practice. But recognize that lack of rigor in doing what you say you're going to do is an impediment to your success as a self being a great CEO. Commitment is just that internal, I think of it more of a mood of commitment, a capacity to be all in on your business. And I tell people this looks pathological. It is almost a pathological level of commitment where people are going like, dude, really, shouldn't you throw in the towel? To succeed at business, you are so faced with so many obstacles for so long that to get through all of that does require a level of stubbornness, of degree of commitment to the outcome. I have, and most people I know that have been in business, every so often, I think of it about every 2 years, get to the level where you think, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? I want to quit. I want to get a job. I'm just going to get a job. And I talk to people about getting a job, and I look at job postings, and from time to time I'll even apply. And at this point, I do it just because of the effect that it has. But when I used to do this, it would be like, and I would talk to people about having a job, and I would look at it, and I would just, as I would get close, be like, I can't do that. They're doing it wrong. They're not they're not working with the people that I want to work with. They're not doing it in a way that's going to succeed like I know it's going to succeed. I'm just so committed to the way I think it needs to be done that I stick with it through thick and thin, and somewhat as a madman sometimes. So having that level of commitment is really essential to winning. And in all the people that turned it out, I see that in all of them, that level of commitment to it. And it's typically, it's much more a commitment towards an idea. You see something that's not working in the marketplace, and you think you can do it better. It's more about this commitment to solving that pain in the marketplace than it is sort of a commitment to be rich. That commitment to be rich isn't very compelling. It doesn't last for very long, and you fail out. So if you're in this and you're committed to be a multimillionaire, and that's the thing that's going to have you do it, typically you're just not going to sustain. If you're really committed to being a multimillionaire, statistically you're better off getting a job somewhere. So the commitment is to the idea and having it be somewhat pathological. Compassion, the capacity to put yourself in someone else's shoes and to care about it, being empathetic, being actively empathetic. If you can't be the kind of person that really cares about your potential customers, then you're in the wrong game. The people that succeeded, that really had that spirit of entrepreneurship that we gave them an award for, cared deeply about the people that they worked, and it inspired them, and it kept them in the game. And then a passion for that, you've heard me talk about passion as a mood that is consistent with being in action towards creating a future that you care about. And so meeting people, what passion feels like in others. If you can't produce that in you, it's really hard to get followers. It's really hard to get people that care about what you're doing. And if you're not a passionate person, if you're not passionate about what you do, odds are you're not going to be able to sustain it long term. So again, these are the skills that if you have these naturally, then being in business is sort of easy for you. You're doing the right things automatically. Not having these doesn't mean you will fail, but what it does mean is you need to have mitigating practices. And if you're really low in a lot of these, then it really does mean that maybe this is not the right game for you, and you need to look at it that as a CEO, you're just not cut out to do it. The product. So I don't really spend a lot of time with clients in assessing their product, because I really have some really easy shortcut kinds of ways to think about it. Now, when I worked with startups, they had some idea. They didn't encounter the marketplace yet. And that really is a different game. But once you encounter the marketplace, a lot of these things get a lot simpler. So I have this sort of set of questions that makes it easier. So are you making a profit? Are you profitable in the work that you do? If you are, what that proves to me, I don't need to know anything about your product. What I know then is that you have something that you can share a compelling story with someone compelling enough that they will give you money. And that the structure of that product is that they will give you enough money that it will allow you to pay your expenses and then some. If you can do that on a small scale, you can do that much better on a large scale. So if you are already in the place where you are selling things at a profit, then the product can succeed. I don't need to know anything about the product. I don't need to assess whether the marketplace will care. And this is a big reason why I work with people who are doing okay. So if you're doing okay, then you probably don't have to question your product. If you have not, if you make a profit, maybe not a profit, but you've got satisfied customers, you're just not paying your expenses. There's, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. You can look at the expense structures. Typically, you can reduce your expenses and raise the prices to get it so you can make a profit. Some people, so have you sold it to strangers? Have you been able to have a conversation with the stranger so that they gave you money? That's a huge validation in the marketplace. Even if you did it once, that's validation. If you did it a bunch of times, then what I can tell you is if you did that a bunch of times, then you can do it way more. You could probably do it cheaper. You can make more money on it. So it's probably successful. Your product probably works. If you haven't yet sold it to strangers, have you sold it to friends? Now, a lot of times friends will encourage you. I mean, these good friends anyway, will tell you, great idea, I love it, man, you're gonna win. And then what happens a lot of times is you say, well, okay, I'm ready to go, do you wanna buy it? And if they don't, the friends that have been encouraging you, they're giving you your love and support, which is meaningful, but it isn't the same as a check. And if they won't give you a check, then that's less grounding that your product is sound. Again, doesn't mean it isn't. It's just, it's a bigger question mark. If you're making a profit, that's like 100% you can do it. If you've satisfied customers, but you're not making a profit yet, it's 80%. If you haven't sold it to friends yet, gosh, it's really, it's less than 50% that you're going to make it. Do you have your friends and other people telling you, God, that's a great idea? That's useful. I mean, that gets you up into 30% range maybe. And then one of the things that I hear from a lot of people is that I've got this great product. It's going to do amazing thing. Nobody's doing it. And anybody that works in this field works with entrepreneurs. They've learned over time to say like, okay, well, the odds of you succeeding are really low because if there's no one else out there doing it, then why not? And typically, if there's no one else out there doing it, as much as we're smart and clever, and that's a great idea, there's a lot of smart and clever people out there. Ideas are inexpensive. They're plentiful, frankly. And if nobody's doing it, it's probably not because no one's thought of it. It's probably because lots of people have tried it and failed. Tried it and failed, tried it and failed. So if no one else is doing it, then most likely 95% odds, if you tell me that, mostly I'm going to go like, you're probably not going to succeed. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it because the reality is sometimes you're right. Sometimes an entrepreneur sees something nobody else is doing, they go off and do it, and they win. It's just makes the likelihood of success much less. And so if you're thinking about, gosh, I'm running out of money, everybody thinks I shouldn't do this, and I haven't sold it, nobody else is selling it, then yeah, maybe it can't work. Structure. Do you have a well-specified constitution for your business? If you haven't specified your business well, if you haven't done all the stuff that I'm teaching in the rest of this course, then it diminishes the likelihood that you're going to succeed. Because what happens is, as you're developing that constitution, if you haven't developed it, what I can tell you is there are all sorts of incoherencies all throughout the little tidbits that you have of your story. If you have a well-specified, well-documented constitution, what that means is you've worked out a lot of the incoherencies, and it probably is something that can live in the world. Do you have the right people in the right seats? If you've got a bunch of people in your company and they're wrong people, wrong seats, man, that's a huge burden to overcome. And then do you have standard practices in place? And again, this is one of those ones that's probably easiest to change. And it isn't 100% that you're going to fail if you don't have these. But these are the things that are indications of success, I would say. Do you have a plan? Do you have a strategy? Have you identified really a pain or an opportunity in the marketplace that you can address in a novel way that you are great at? You have a strategy with incremental steps and a plan with very specific tactics along the way. Is it specified, clear, and understandable? If you gave me your plan, and if you've got something written and you share it with people and you're frustrated because everybody acts like that's not the right information in there, or they don't know what they're talking about, they just don't know what they're talking about. If you get a lot of negative feedback about your strategy and plan, that's a problem. It indicates a weakness in your strategy and plan. And if you get that a lot, because typically most people will be very positive. They won't share the negative assessments with you. Only very brave people or somebody that you've paid a lot of money will share the negative assessments, because there's really not much to win to share a negative assessment. Most people don't like to hear that stuff, and so they won't share it. Does your strategy fire people up? When you tell them about it, do they get visibly interested and like, tell me more, and how do I invest? Or do they go away? Do you have a short-term plan? Is it coherent, grounded, compelling, crisp? Is it a good plan? People look at it, it's great, it's tight. Then this is an indication that you will succeed. And if you've got those things and people like it, that you're in good shape. Relationships, you need to have relationships to win. You need to be able to form relationships to win. This is probably a lot, so if you're an extrovert or a salesperson, odds are you're good at this and you've got these things. There are a lot of people who are engineers who have started businesses that don't have a deep appreciation for this. I probably tend more towards the introvert side, maybe 60-40. I have a small number of close, deep relationships. People that are more sales-like people tend to have an easier job of it. It has been a handicap where I need mitigating practices for me to succeed in business, and where I just go back to my ground, I tend to grow less. I tend to find less market. I tend to get less customers. I have to get out of my box. I have to address my ground to get the business, and it's something that's been with me always and always will be. And so if you've got that, recognize, a lot of times what will happen is people that are like that think that they can make a great product and it will just win in the marketplace. And that's just not really borne out in practice. There are a lot of great products that didn't have great marketing. I'll take an A+ marketing capacity with a B product way better than an A+ product with a B marketing plan. It just doesn't work as well. And so the earlier you can recognize that, so if you're an engineer and you have that strategy, you have a huge deficit. If you're an engineer, have an introverted orientation, don't value that, and think that you're going to build something and they will come, and you recognize that is a problem, then you've got better chance for success. And this is one of those places, are you coachable? Because if you're coachable, you probably know that. If you're not coachable, these are the people that were engineers in an automobile company, have some idea, they came out, they start a business, and they disappear quickly, is what I found. And then, so what are those mitigating practices, or what are the standard practices to help you grow? If you're regularly going out, even if you don't like it, but if you like it and you're going out, that's great. If you're meeting new people, you're sustaining relationships, you're turning business relationships into friend relationships, then you're probably in good shape. Last thing I want to talk about is runway. How much time do you have to turn it out? So if you're not making enough money to pay your bills right now, the question is, when do you run out of money? Because you typically are going on savings, right? So your savings or some other place to get money. If you're going off of savings, you have some amount of time before you run out of savings, or you have a certain amount of savings which you're willing to put in. And that determines how long you can go without paying your way, so to speak, with the business. Now, this could be money, supplies, time, tolerance of spouses, your personal tolerance. And I would just say that it's going to take longer than you think, longer than you want. When I talk to, if people ask me, will I help them? And if they have less runway than 6 months, I may actually decline helping them because it's just not worth it. Because a lot of people think that if they've got 6 months, they can go out and get business. The truth is it's way harder than people think it is to get the kind of customers. Even if you're in the place where you got a customer or two and you've got to grow, so you're making some money, you're paying some of your bills, but not all of your bills, and you have to grow. You have to grow. It's just going to take, it's harder than you think. It's going to take longer than you think. If you say that you've got 3 to 6 months, it's a significant handicap. I say that you need to really have a minimum of 2 years. And it's kind of a broad general rule of thumb, and I'm not a big fan of broad general rules of thumb, but it does kind of work in whether it's a product, it's a service. Sometimes you need more. I mean, if you're making a medical product, it's going to take a lot longer than that. A lot of people that have consulting products or service products think that they're just going to go out and tell people what they do and they're going to be amazed and hire them. It's very hard. Think about, focus on that time to safety, where maybe you want to make $150,000 a year, maybe you want to make $2 million, and rather than thinking about how long does it take to get to that, make sure you are thinking in terms of how long does it take you to get to safety, and then figure out after that how long it takes you to get to thrive. So, because you want to speed that time to safety, because there's this real undeniable thing that happens, which is your mood becomes impossible on a short runway. If you are fearful, if you need business, then people can read that in you, and that desperation doesn't sell. Desperation doesn't sell. And if you are afraid, it's really hard to mask that. It's really hard to manage your mood. When you're in a mood of despair or panic, really hard to get out of that. And you need to anticipate however you are with stress, because a lot of people are pretty good with stress, but when you get down to 3 months runway, you need to plan on being kind of worthless, because no matter what you plan on, when you get down to 3 months, your sleep is going to suffer, your health is going to start to suffer, the stress hormones become huge, and it just becomes, your efficiency and effectiveness diminishes greatly. And if you weren't doing great when you were hitting on all cylinders, when you start to get panicky, you're really going to be much more ineffective. And so once you start to get panicky, it's really time to throw in the towel, frankly, or really put, at that point, the thing to work on is getting more runway. How do you get more runway? Get investors, change your expense structure. At that point, it's not about getting customers. It's either about getting a job or putting all your attention and figuring out how to get a better runway. So hopefully this has been effective in giving you some tools to assess yourself as to whether or not you can make it. And if you left this talk encouraged and thinking, gosh, I think I've got something and I should continue to go with it, then I think that's probably right. If you really got discouraged in this and thought, maybe I'm wasting my money, maybe I'm doing something I shouldn't do, I think maybe then it's time to really hire a professional, hire an accountant, hire somebody to help, hire a consultant to help you make that assessment. Because some of the best work that I've done, that may sound hard or cruel, is being in a position where I can help somebody recognize that what they're doing isn't going to work. And once they get that conclusion and they stop it, it either gives them the opportunity to come back, build energy for another attempt, or they can pivot And saving somebody a year or 2 years of failing in a business is a huge success, and you need to think of it that way. The particular business you're looking at is not the end of your entrepreneurial career. There's all sorts of other things to do. And so pivoting is not something to be ashamed of, or it is, we all do it. And so hopefully this has been useful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And I just want you to know that I have great admiration for people that are starting a business. And so regardless of where you are, I just want to say congratulations on doing that, and congratulations on taking the time to do this kind of examination. I have great, I just have a great sense of dignity and honor for what you're doing. So congratulations. Thanks for what you do.